All right. Well, good morning and good evening, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. Today we have the wonderful Barb Patterson, and before our before I hit the record button, I was mentioning that I love the way Barb writes, the way that you explain and discuss the principles, and one of the things, and I want to talk about this. I think one of your gifts is because you actually go out into the world of business or people that actually don't know the principles. I think that's one of the best ways to learn about the principles for yourself and get a deeper understanding is to share it with people that kind of have no idea what you're about to share. And I wanted to ask you, and this is something that I ask most everybody. Well, before I ask you that question is, tell us a little bit about how you got into the principles and what you do now with in regards to this understanding.
Yeah, well, hi everybody, and thank you, Amir. I've been looking forward to this conversation today. Just to let everyone know, I've did a mastermind and had Amir as one of our guest interviews, talking about entrepreneurial journey and this understanding. So I think today's conversation, you'll have just as much to share as me, Amir, and everyone else on the call as well. But I came about this through Michael Neal, and it was about 8 or 9 years ago now. I have to do the math. And I was living over in Europe and decided I was an executive in a company leading the global talent management leadership development organization, and decided that I wanted to start my own business. I had been a consultant and had my own coaching consulting business before, but just felt that inner pull, that kind of draw to do it. And so as that voice got louder, I
Come,
decided
come.
to make the leap, and decided I needed a coach to help me do that,
Awesome.
you know. And I always laugh because in my mind, I was hiring the coach to help me be really strategic and smart and, have a good business. And when I was younger and had started my own business, I just sort of leapt. And there was, a lot of wonderful things about being naive, and just going for it. And yet this time I was like, I'm going to be smarter. I'm going to get a partner that's going to help me be strategic and thoughtful and make good decisions and all of that. And so I ran across Michael's stuff on the internet. And it's funny because for whatever reason in that searching, I didn't know he had a radio show. I didn't know any of that, any of his history. It was just sort of, I came across him. He knew the coaching world. He was successful. I liked, where he came from. So I reached out to him and we had a really good conversation, and I decided to work with him. Now, at that time, that many years ago, Michael was in his own journey of this understanding, and he didn't have anything about it on his website. So I didn't know what the principles were, the inside out, any of that. I really hired him because of, I thought he'd be a great coach, a business coach to me. But I laugh because in our very first conversation, he started sharing this. And it was funny because I could hear something in what he was doing. And he was kind of, this is my interpretation of it, right? Was we were walking in his neighborhood and he started kind of sharing, but not just sharing, finally I said to him, what are you saying? Said, you're saying something. I know you're saying, what is it? And then he said, well, there's this understanding. And it was just really something spoke to me. There wasn't my intellect, because of all my years of training. I've been in the leadership, organizational development, personal development field my whole adult life in one form or another. So I've had psychology training. I've done a lot of self-help stuff, a lot of spiritual things. And, I could feel that what he was saying, there was truth in it, and it was new, and my intellect couldn't quite make sense of it, but I could feel something waking up in me, is probably the best way I know how to talk about it. Now, I remember, thank God for Michael's patience with me, because I would have to sit with him and I'd be like, wait a minute, Are you saying that our past, feelings are not coming from the past? They aren't coming, it was like, I had to let go of so many preconceived ideas I had about what made me who I am and how I worked and why I was the way I was. And the thing that kept me doing that was I could feel there was truth in what was being said and what was waking up inside of me. So I kind of had to be patient with myself, or Michael had to be patient with me, however you look at it, to be on a whole new learning curve. And, I just will say, I had to fire myself a couple of times from like trying to figure it out. I had to I saw that what was getting in the way of me deepening my insights and seeing more was I was listening through the lens of being a good coach or consultant. So I was constantly listening with how this was going to help clients or help my business. And that was sort of diluting. It was keeping me at more of a conceptual level than allowing things to land in a deeper way. So once I saw that, I just said, all right, I'm doing this for me. There's no, I've got to be willing to be a student here, to really be a student of the understanding and let go of what I hope it will help me do or improve in my life. And once that started to happen, I feel like the trajectory of my understanding took on a whole new level. And so, Amir, I'll just say, doing business and working with entrepreneurs and organizations has always been a passion of mine and always a part of it. And I think the thing I'm most excited about and why I love talking about this is when I saw that where we come from inside of ourselves, I don't just mean state of mind, but that we have as a part of who we are, this deeper innate nature. And that as a human, we're sort of the intersection of that deeper formless energy and the form. And that comes through us in our unique way, our flavors. And so considering both of those, like I'm not just it's not just about understanding thought, but it's about understanding more of who we really are. When I considered both those things, my business transformed. And so talking to people about business was just a natural step.
There's a couple things that you said that I really liked is you didn't all of a sudden get it. And in our community, I feel like once we get it, we're in a rush to have someone else get it immediately. Like there is, how I'm trying to share this with my family members or coworkers and they're just not getting it. And I love that it might take some time.
Yeah.
And I'm curious though, when you're in a business situation, are you on a time, like if they say we're giving you 2 weeks, how do you typically respond with something like that in a business?
Well, for sure, but it's really simple. Businesses and entrepreneurs have usually spent a lot of money on training and development. Whether it's kind of larger corporations or it's even an entrepreneur or a solopreneur trying to learn how to do more, right? Learn how to do online, whatever it is, people have invested in training and development. Yet when I say to them, how much of that sticks, and how much of that, is sustainable, and you begin to have them see that there's a relationship between this understanding and people's ability to learn, to take things in, to transform, to have real shifts, you start to help them see that this understanding requires a different way of learning. It requires space, it requires reflection, it requires consideration, and yet the return on that investment you can also demonstrate and show, and it just makes sense to people. Am I making sense, Amir? Is that answering your question?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's built into the understanding that you can't speed this up. It's almost like that's like, folks, this is going to be a different way of looking at how things work. And it may take some time, or you may get it right away, but I'm not interested either way. Let's just have this conversation. In other words, it puts time off the table in a sense. Like, let's
Yeah.
forget about that for a little bit. I think that's kind of what you're pointing to. And I love what you said is all the other things that you've tried that were either going to promise you something in 2 days or a week. How's that working out?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
let's try something else and let's see how that works out.
Yeah, I have a new client that I'm working with, and they're a global financial company. And they were having issues between the teams, two teams, one in Europe, one in the US. So in their mind, right, what makes sense is they're going to hire someone to come in, deal with the team, and then everything will be fixed. But in doing intake with them and really listening, I could see that the two leaders, the most leveraged place was with the two leaders, was to start there and then to do the team after. Well, when I proposed a 4-day intensive for those two leaders, you can imagine separate ones. You can imagine you can almost count on it. Like they're like, we can't afford to be away from our businesses for that long, but well, here's the thing. I've just gotten really comfortable pushing back on that because I understand the value of those 4 days. Like I've been a coach and executive coaching for a very long time. And when I first came across this understanding, and there were kind of this model of an intensive, because I knew I would get pushback, I sort of went, I'm just going to do coaching the way I always have, the structure of it, right? What I do in the sessions is very different. But then I did an intensive with a leader first one time, and I went, oh, what am I thinking? Like where we were at the end of those 4 days was it would have taken me 6 months of an hour conversation once a week or once every other week. And when I saw the return on investment for him, I saw the return on investment for the company, I was completely fine taking a stand. And at that moment, after that time, I basically have said, I don't do long-term coaching with leaders without an intensive at the beginning. Now, because of that, now don't get, I'm not saying I never break a rule. Like I just want to be careful there, right? But what with this company that I just signed with, they had to understand what my philosophy was. So I had to be comfortable and confident in saying what I want to say. But it's so easy for me to say, listen, if you want development, if you're wanting to develop your leaders, then this is what's required. Now, if you aren't concerned about their development, right, then we can look at we can do just the team piece, right? But if you're wanting to develop and shift and see transformation, this is the way I work. Now, I've probably I'm sure I have. I can think right now a couple of clients that haven't worked with me because of that. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with it.
I wanted to switch gears. You've worked with Michael Neal. You're with the Pranskys, I believe, as well, right? You've done a lot of stuff
I
with the
used to
Pranskys.
be, yeah.
Okay, or you used
Yeah.
to be with the
Yeah.
Pranskys. I've seen
Yeah.
videos. Since you've been around, what do you think is one of the most fundamental things to share in regards to the principles? And why I'm asking you that is there is um, people called inside out, people now non-duality is getting into the mix with this stuff, or the single paradigm, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
In your point of view and what you share, what do you think is fundamental when we're sharing this stuff?
I think it's fundamental that we stay as authentic as we can to what we see for ourselves. I would hear Michael or George or Aaron Turner, who I love the way Aaron shares. I would hear them share, and I would love what they were saying. Like what they were saying, like would impact me. I'd love it. It would make sense. It would clarify things for me. So I would get caught up in thinking and focusing on how I said what I said. I got really caught up in that and thinking that, if I could just say it better, it would be better. But as you can probably imagine, where that put me was more in my head. That put me more in kind of trying to figure things out in the moment. It created lack of presence and lack of connection. Like there's a variable of distraction, and I'll just use that word for this moment, but a variable of distraction. So am I being distracted by my own thinking, trying to figure it out, what's going on, analyzing my own assessment, or am I here? Am I here listening? And that variability is everything in this work, whether we're signing on a client, talking to a potential client, or we're doing client work or group work. I started to see, I would have said I was a really good listener and good at connection. I just, I would have given myself an A on that. But through this understanding, I've started to see, holy cow, I'm a little embarrassed to admit how much I lived in my head, and how much I was like here versus here. And because I've been in this kind of helping people and, kind of been my MO, I came to the table with an idea that my intuition was already pretty good. I was a good assessment of people. Now, whether that's true or not is sort of irrelevant. What I didn't realize was there's more on offer. There's infinite levels of depth. There's infinite levels of connection. There's infinite levels of listening. And so the more I saw that, I started to appreciate when my mind was distracted versus here, and distracted by my own conclusions, my own assessments, is distracted. So it's kind of that internal gauge of listening allowed me to go beyond the concept of the way everyone else was sharing and start to really listen to what wanted to come through me in Barb's way and Barb's flavor. And that's why, I work with a lot of solopreneurs. And because of this community, I work with people that want to share this too. And I will always say, you have to listen to you. There is no right way to share this understanding. There are no rules. And so when people, in my opinion, this is just Barb's point of view, right? So in my opinion, I want to work with people that are helping me discover what I see and helping me share from that place versus finding the right way to share the principles.
I mean, right there, that little thing that you just said, I'm actually going to take that clip out. Just, that was absolutely beautiful, because that's one of the things I think so many of us get lost in, the right way to share.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my biggest insight when I threw out a metaphor at my recovery center that was probably I was tired that day. I was exhausted. It was a dumb metaphor. And I had 5 people say that's what I needed to hear. And I started to go, maybe there's something to this idea of just really sharing what I see in this moment, without any preconceived notions or without an idea of what I'm supposed to do, and just do it. And going along the lines of what you wrote, I wanted to discuss your latest blog about just going out there and trying things. Because in my experience, the trying and actually doing it is where a lot of my learnings happen. Like when people say, oh, it's easy for you to say, Amir, you have 2,000 people in your Facebook group. It's easy for you to say, Amir, because you do coaching. And I said, no, it's easy for me because I do coaching, because I created a group, not because I have the group. But I wanted to get your idea on that as well, on just doing things and learning from there.
Yeah, when I said earlier that this understanding, one of the ways I've seen it like have one of the biggest impacts is in the way I do my business. And part of that is exactly what that blog and what you're speaking to, Amir, is when we understand thought, when we understand we're living in the feeling of thought and we begin to have a different relationship to it, in that relationship, we naturally start to tap more into our resiliency, our okayness. We get, we're less captivated by feelings. I just realized like, wow, we make our world so small by trying to avoid certain feelings. Like, I don't want to feel awkward. Okay, well then close in. I don't want to feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Close that in. I don't want to, make a fool of myself, or I don't, I want to know, I want to feel confident. You start to see we make up all these ideas that make our world really small. And as a business person and stepping into wanting to have more impact, more reach, wanting to grow, I really see that our businesses can be a source of self-actualization in a really cool way. In a really, really cool way. And with this understanding, there's nothing I've seen that has had more of a profound impact. Any of the other training, any of the other stuff, it's really been me being a student for myself of this understanding is what changed the ground in which I build my business. And part of that has been the willingness to just engage. Like, I started to see that I had these ideas around that would just keep me stalled. They would just slow me down. I can remember one time realizing that I was having all this rational and reasonable thinking that I was just taking at face value. And then I had an insight and I thought, oh, that's just self-doubt. That's just thought too. What if I didn't pay attention to that? What if I allowed myself to just to just engage? And then when I did that, I started having more fun. I started accessing new capabilities. See, new capabilities didn't come from skills and training. It actually came from me being willing to put myself in the unknown, to try things with no attachment, to be willing to grow and learn in the act of doing it versus trying to figure it out all internally first. And in a very simple way, it's like, oh, you want momentum in your business? You got to engage. You want to see results? You got to engage. And the other thing that this understanding really helped me with is I saw that it's in real time that we get insight. That, in real time, we get feedback and information and insight that helps us keep moving forward, not in my future imagination scenario planning. So when I started to see, I'm like, oh, it's like, the formula for growth in business and in life and being more in your life is engage, listen, take another step. Engage, listen, take another step. Engage, listen, take another step. And you start to see when we get more willing to do that, to follow that inner nudge, to follow our way, to listen to our, where we're drawn and step into that, then you start to see a natural momentum builds from that place. And some things I step into, it's like nothing happens. Well, that's information, right? It's a redirect. It's a try something else. And the more willing we are to do that and hold it all lightly, you'll be amazed at what you start to create and what you discover about yourself.
That is 100% on point. When people ask me, how did you write your book? I say, I wrote it with a lot of insecurity, a lot of joy, a lot of confusion, and an infinite amount of feelings throughout my process. And they said, well, what did you do with the ones with anxiety? I kept typing. Well, what about when you had fears about what people think about it? Oh, with that one, I kept typing. In other words, you start to see, like you're saying brilliantly, it's not that you don't have them anymore. It's just, it matters less that you have them.
Yeah.
Those feelings, those ideas and thoughts.
Yeah.
And it's like having a radio on while you're doing cooking. It's like, so you don't like a song on the radio, what are you going to do? And I love that you said that. And I know people may or may not say here, well, that sounds too easy. And I always want to say, well, what if it is that easy?
Yeah.
And you've just missed it the whole time because you thought it was more difficult.
That's right. That's right. I mean, in my experience, this is where the understanding helps us. Like, we come back to the logic of the understanding. And that is that, my version of reality is being shaped by thought in this moment. And there is always limitation to what I see because of that. There is always more I don't know, more I don't see than what I see. So being able to relate and be less attached and in a way kind of be suspect of yourself, that little bit of distance has been rich with new engagement, new ideas, new thought. And I don't mean like I just get these brilliant, amazing, thoughts. I mean, I just keep moving forward. It gives me what I need to keep typing, as you're saying. It gives me what I need to not be as worried about a feeling. I used to think my feelings were informing me about life and what to do. Thank God for this understanding, because now I know, oh, my feelings are just telling me where my head's at. End of story. I can just keep moving. I can keep moving. And like I said earlier, it's realizing like there's the experience we're having, but there's so much more to the story. There's this infinite potential, this infinite creative life force, this formless energy that we are a part of, that, is a part of who we are too. In fact, there's more we don't see about ourselves than what we do see. And because most training, all of my years of training had me focused on what I could see, it wasn't as leveraged as how this understanding points to a bigger truth of who we are and how we create.
Yeah, I remember a story. I took many years of how to be not afraid of public speaking. And then
Mm,
they invited me back because I started doing a bunch of public speaking. And the first question they said is, how do you stop yourself from being afraid? And I said, I stopped caring about being afraid. And now I public speak being afraid. And no one ever told me that was okay. Like I
mm,
spent so much time trying to go from a I'm at an 8 fear to get down to a 6. And all of a sudden, one day I woke up, I said, I'm making those numbers up. Like I'm
mm,
just having an energy go through me while I'm speaking. And
mm.
I'm gonna move it over to grounding. And someone saying, can Barb say anything about grounding? To me, that is a level of grounding to
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
That is a level of grounding. There's a sense of peace when there looks like there's a storm. There's a sense of relaxation, even though in my head it looks like there's a lot going on. There's something beneath every single experience I'm having that's kind of guiding me now that I didn't see before. And I don't know what grounding means to you.
Yeah, I think it is. It's grounding for me in a way is kind of where we're coming from in any given moment. And I think that, I used to think that I needed more grounding to be better, so then I was kind of on that train, let me learn as much as I can so I can be better. And not realizing that, no, first of all, it's just moment to moment, where are we coming from? But for me, it was really considering, um, I spent a lot of time thinking about how to improve and how to be the best coach, consultant, and then teacher of this I could be. And I had this kind of humbling in a really lovely way moment when I had this thought come through that said, what if you were as curious about universal mind or what you can't see as you are about trying to have a good business? Like, I could see that the majority of my mental focus activity was in the direction of my business or improving myself. And I thought, yeah, give a little bit to the understanding again, to really seeing for myself, getting my own relationship to that deeper nature of life, that universal mind, the intelligence, the formless energy, your essence, whatever you want to call it. I don't, you find your word again, what you call it, what it means to you. I really saw that the more we have our own personal experience of the understanding. So for me, it was not just getting good at thought and relating to it and being okay about my experience. It was also discovering and beginning to have a personal relationship and a knowing inside myself of what is that deeper part of us? What is that? And then when I began to do that, and it's like the never ending learning curve, right? Again, there are infinite levels of depth to discover. So there's no arrival. There's no, arrival point. But I started to see that the practical implication of that, I started to see like moment to moment in my grounding. Like I remember the first time I was putting on one of the summits I do, I was talking to Aaron Turner and I said, yeah, sometimes I have this thought, like, who the hell are you? Like, who the hell are you to do that? And then Aaron said to me, he goes, yeah, that's a really good question. Who are you? What does the understanding tell you about who you are? And I was like, oh yeah, all of us are both this amazing, rich human and this infinite, deeper intelligence. Like all of us are that. And that's why I was saying before, it's like, to me, the grounding is your own personal relationship to all of who you are and your understanding of where experience is coming from. You keep coming back to that. The more, anytime things look hard, I no longer look at, well, yes, I do. But eventually I remember that it's not about my activities. It's not about my state of mind. It's not, it's really coming back to and remembering the truth of who we are and where experience is coming from. That simple orientation, that's what I call grounding. And because life is, as they say, the contact sport, right? Because I think we're always on the edge of a blind spot. We're always on the edge of new learning. We're always have an opportunity to see more. So to me, it's like totally okay that I get lost and I forget, and then I wake up and see more, like to me, that was a long answer to your question, but I think it's everybody's personal relationship to this understanding and whatever that means for you. And it's being willing to stay a student. I think it was Keith Blevins that I heard say one time that if we want to share this, that part of that is the balance of remaining a student and sharing what we know. And because we remain a student, there's always a deepening, and then what we share deepens too.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Now, you happen to be very articulate when you share this stuff. You may or may not know that, but just listening to you on this call, you're very clear. And I'm curious, when you're sharing with businesses, do you talk the way you're talking with us right now, or is there a different structure? Do you have, why I'm asking is if, I know Marnix is going to be speaking to a big organization in Holland, and there's some other people here.
Yeah.
My question is, do you have a structure on the wall, or do you sit and just speak like you are right now, free flowing?
Yeah, I love this question because when I shared earlier about how I would hear George and Aaron and Michael share, and I think it was, oh yeah, I got to say it that way. People will hear it that way. Anytime I kind of did that, it might create some interest. It might create, but if I couldn't really back it in my own feeling and my own knowing, they were always just sort of, they might have been tweets. You know what I mean? It was like, it had no more substance than a tweet, like it was just like, but, I like to say a tweet every once in a while. So, but what I started to see was, oh yeah, I just got to get okay being in the moment with as free a mind as possible. And the more comfortable I am with that, what you start to see is you get evidence. You get your own evidence that things come through. And even if you feel like you're stumbling a little bit, you realize it doesn't matter, things come through. You start to see that impact and the quality of your conversations are more a factor of your ability to be in real time than they are knowing what you know. Do you know, in that real time, what you know will naturally come forward. things, and that'll be a combination of the understanding, a combination of your education, your past, like what comes through in the moment. Like you said earlier, Amir, you begin to just trust that. And you see that, in a freer mind, a more present, freer mind, you hear things, you respond. And in a way, you start to see that that's the formula. Show up, get present, and see what comes through. And in the same way, all I'm doing, whether I'm talking to an entrepreneur, a business, a team, is I'm listening and then seeing how this understanding can help. That's it. That's the connecting the dots I'm doing, is how can this understanding based on what they're presenting help? So I do not have a formula. And I'll just say that in the same way, if a child asks you a question, you know how you naturally find a way to talk to a child differently than you might, your spouse or adult friend. You just naturally, you don't go, uh-oh, child, I have to speak child. Like you don't, you just, you just naturally find that's all you're doing, no matter who's in front of you. You're just in real time, you'll find a language and you'll see, like you'll throw things out and people will resonate or not. And then you keep going. Like it's totally fine to keep finding your way. And sometimes, I have so many stories. Like I know I've heard people that are trained this say, you can't talk about that in business, or you have to kind of find your way. Not my experience at all. I have talked about all of it. And I've had conversations, with one leader not too long ago, earlier this year, I think it was. I said, well, let's talk about connection. Now, he was not an effective communicator, and he was kind of struggling. And then, but when I said that, he goes, well, do you mean like connection with the person, or like the universal connection of all of us? And I smiled. I go, well, let's talk about that. Like you just, you never know. Yeah. Then I've had other people that I'm trying to wake them up, like where they think their intellect is their bread and butter, and it's the source of creativity and their why they're as successful as they are. So in those conversations, it might have taken longer to kind of help them see that that we all have a natural capability for creativity, for aha moments, for those out of the blue ideas. But you find a language in a way that works with that person. And I'll just share briefly one story because it's kind of funny, because one guy I worked with, it took much longer, but it didn't matter because we were still having amazing, helpful conversations. He was really revved up. He was starting to experience panic attacks. He was this inventor. He had a lot, he was getting his product ready. And so he could see the relationship between a sped up mind and his stress. So that alone began to have leverage for him, right? That was helpful. But I knew as long as he kind of believed it was still all on him, he'd struggle. And I really wanted to help him see he had this other resource. It took time. And it was actually one time talking about confidence, and he was describing confidence, and the way he described it was how we would describe mind. And that became the door, that became the window, to begin to wake him up to that he already has something else going that's available to him.
You touched on something that I think we forget in our community sometimes, is when you come in with that kind of exploratory way of coming in, most people, whether it's at my recovery center or some of the businesses I've worked with, they can get information immediately from Google. They know that kind of thinking and getting information is available at all times. Mm-hmm. And we forget how valuable simplicity is and how much we don't get enough of that in our life anyway. Mm-hmm. And even sitting with someone for an hour and not saying more than 5 words is transformative. That's right. We don't sit in that space. Mm-hmm. And especially business leaders, especially mm-hmm. people that need to know answers right away for their business. And for those that are here thinking, well, I don't think I have enough understanding of the principles to share with leaders, you have a lot less to do than you think. I mean, that's what I think, what I love about what you're pointing to, because we don't get enough me time, alone time, downtime,
Yeah.
settling time, simplicity time, that shift alone changes people's lives.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely agree and love what you're saying, Amir. And that's the other thing that I would say is what we're up to is very different. And I love being different. I love telling businesses and leaders and whoever, like, oh, well, what I do is different. Like I can get behind that because I've spent millions of dollars on behalf of companies, bringing in all sorts of different kinds of training and competencies and skills and coaching. And I've spent, I don't want to do the math, you know what I mean? It's like, so to see that, oh no, I can stand in the knowing that this understanding is transformative. But you're right, it's not the concept that's transformative. What's happening is we're waking people up to a truth of who they are, where their experience is coming from. And that requires a different way of being. And that's why, if we show up, one of the things I had to unlearn, and George and Linda were kind of instrumental with me in this, is I had so many ideas about what it meant to be a good coach. I had spent so much of my time presenting in front of people. Part of what I had to even become aware of was like I had all those ideas were actually kind of getting in the way of just getting real, of just kind of connecting. And it was all with good intent. But, I really saw, I'm like, oh, business Barb is here, or professional Barb is here. And it would just be like a little layer, right? And so I've kind of gotten comfortable at saying, no, I'm going to take all that away, knowing that the depth of our work that we do with people comes from our ability to connect, to be human to human, soul to soul, and to connect and to get real and to take as much of that persona stuff out of the way as possible. And that client I was telling you that I just signed with, it was funny. I was in New York, and because I've had years in the corporate world, I could feel myself in a conversation with him starting to just like do a little bit, like add a little extra, like, oh, I need to add credibility here. I need to add professional, and then, but in an experimental way, I didn't want to do that. Every time I felt that, I'd be like, no, just be you. And I would literally like just, and it was an amazing conversation. It was a great conversation. And to your point, like, we can't wake people up to the depth of this understanding, to the depth of their true nature through an intellectual, conceptual way. We can be stimulating in that level. We can be interesting at that level. We can be entertaining at that level. But to really have impact and have people have transformation happen, that's what you're speaking to, Amir. It's
Yeah.
that coming from that, the depth of this understanding, the depth of connection, being willing to take all that other stuff out of the way and just be with someone.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things I always say is we don't meet people where they're at. They meet themselves where they're at, right? And that's what's nice about me is it's not my job to meet other people. When I show up and I'm grounded and I meet myself where I'm at and whatever shows up for me, it it doesn't give them permission, but they get to see there's another way of showing up.
Mm-hmm.
That Amir's in no rush to figure it out. One of the biggest things that I have when I talk to my recovery centers, I don't know, let's explore. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great question. I don't know how to answer that. Let's look at it together. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden they start to go, you're okay not having a quick answer for us? And all of a sudden they go, well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's something to settling a little bit and looking deeper to see what the answer is. Because
Yeah.
I can give you a quick answer and you might go a tweet answer. I love that, tweeting. But then you leave and wait for another answer or question. And then we just do that in and again. And so like you were mentioning, this is a different type of conversation. I'm in no rush. You're in no rush. Let's explore. Let's play.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play. We do have, I want to take the next, we have this This is amazing. But um, uh, Kamini, that's a big question, and I don't know if we want to jump into that. She says, "Where does experience come from?" And then George asks, "How much of what you do is to remind folks of what they saying, feed it back to them?" I'm not. Maybe we need to get George on that. I'm not sure what he means by that. That's not George Pransky, folks. That's George Garino. I just want to make that clear. Where does experience? Well, do you want to jump into that? Where's experience coming from? I would ask before that is, uh, we don't have her on there, but why that would be important for her? Because I'm curious if that's just wanting to know how you want to see it, but maybe you have an answer to that. Where does experience come from?
Well, I kind of like that you want to ask why they're asking the question. And I'm happy to answer it. But um, all of us getting comfortable at answering that from where we're at in any moment is way more valuable than what I'm going to say. Like being willing to answer that question for yourself. Like, I think it was Michael one time at a 3PGC conference said that if you want to stump any of the, kind of original teachers, ask them to describe the principles. And everybody's like, but our willingness to be uncomfortable, to find our way, to find our language is just the most important thing you can do. So I just want to put that out there. There is no better way. There's no one way. And again, if you allow yourself to just answer and realize that our minds are designed, right? The understanding tells us we come back to what we know. Our minds are designed to give us thought in the moment, to help us out, to help us figure things out, to find our way, to answer. You get on an elevator, you don't have to think about, like things occur to you to say hello to somebody or a conversation with a friend. That's what you want to see. That's available to you in any conversation, in any situation, that you can come back to know our minds. We are designed to have thought. Thought is fluid. We'll keep finding our way. We can look at it like throwing spaghetti on a wall sometimes, but you start to see confidence and certainty for you is not going to come by having a great answer. It's going to come when you rest in the knowing of who you are, how our minds work, and that you can rely on the fact that you'll have ideas. See, I just wanted all my ideas to be brilliant. And so, I didn't have an appreciation for the fact that I was having ideas, right? And confidence and certainty in myself changed when I saw how the system works, not when I got a really good answer. When I saw, oh, yeah, I'll find my way. I wish I could be more brilliant at times, but oh, well, it's knowing, like, there is no special pipeline. There is nobody, we all have access. And at the, human and spiritual way, we're all designed the same, meaning that our minds are designed to clear, thought comes through, we don't control it. We can be in a situation and ideas will come. And then our feeling experience is fluid, it's on a continuum. So when you start to see that and you get less enamored with the actual experience and more enamored with kind of how we work, I've seen that change people's certainty and confidence. And coming back to where we started, they're way more willing to just engage, to be okay at any level, like the full range of the human experience, right? Not just the good ones or the ones we like. We get good at the full range of the human experience.
Yeah, and I'm with you. When those questions were very interesting for me for a very long time,
Mhm.
until I realized that when someone says where experience comes from, my best answer, like you pointed out, is I'm in the experience. So why don't I see it for myself? Because I'm doing it. If I'm speaking about it, that's actually not the experience anymore. So that's a great question to inquire.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about that question is you're going to use experience to answer it. your own experience. That's what's funny. You're the very thing you want to answer is happening in experience. So look inside. I mean, I know that sounds trivial, but it's amazing how much more nourishing our answers are when our answers come from ourselves than if Barb or Amir or Michael, Neil or George answers. And and I know that sounds like we're not answering the question, but it's a genuine inquiry that I think is an important one to ask for yourself.
Yeah.
Um, does anyone want to jump? We're getting people are saying this is very this I have to say. Um, I thought you're gonna I was like, there's surely going to be something more uh, strategic. There's got to be something you say differently than some of the other practitioners or teachers. And you pleasantly surprised me that it is back to simplicity. It doesn't matter if you're working with a big Fortune 500 company. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
There is no such thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, in a way, Amir, business is a mental construct.
Mm.
You know, it just is. And so, you know, it's funny. I know for me, because it's been a part of my world and an interest, you know, working with business at first, when I started to learn this didn't look like a business conversation. But as soon as my grounding, it's when I started to really see more, I was like, oh, you know, this is a business conversation to be having. But it was interesting because I was okay kind of finding my way, and it took time, like I said. But the first time that I worked with somebody that had been diagnosed bipolar, I was panicked. You know, like it was like, oh, I can't help. What do I know? I'm not, you know, and then it was again, it was me, it was the understanding that helped me out. It wasn't like getting a crash course on bipolar that helped me out. It was me seeing that, oh, I'm reactive right now. Oh, let me see, like, oh, if I go beyond my reactivity, what occurs to me? Oh, my presence is what's gonna, you know, do the work here. We'll find our way. Like, and I had to just get okay, not knowing, feeling a little bit out of my realm, you know, being in the unknown. That's an understanding issue. That's not a skills and competency issue. That's where I'm saying it is always coming back to us. Everything we do, we have the best superpower. We can come back in any moment, and our feelings will tell us, you know, our level of reactivity, our clarity versus distortion, just to use that, right? And then we know beyond our experience in this moment, there's something else really amazing and powerful that we have. And those two things constantly give us an anchor and a place to come home to, and a place to remember, and a way to get our bearings, whether we're doing an online thing for the first time, whether we're talking to a group, whether we're talking to a potential client or a loved one. You know, that's where the understanding is like the best gift in the world. And so we see that for ourselves, no matter what we're up to. We see that for the people we're talking to as well.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And you even saying that corporations is just an idea or a business.
Mm.
I say this understanding is an equal opportunity understanding.
Yeah.
Someone comes to me and says they're addicted to something. I say, great, I can speak to them. They're
Yeah.
hurting in their business. Great, I can speak to them. It works the same no matter how much money they have, how
That's
much
right.
money they don't have, where they lived, what kind of experiences. This is what's incredibly unique and brilliant about the principles. Um, I could speak to you for 5 more hours, but unfortunately, we're running out of time. I did want to ask you, what are you up to? How can people get a hold of you? I'm going to put links, below on the video, but can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, you know, I have a couple of things that I'm really doing that I'm kind of loving right now. But one is I've worked with a group of solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, and kind of how this understanding can really help them grow their businesses. And so it's kind of this idea of, can you have the depth of this understanding, the spiritual, in a way, conversation, and the practical, connection to what you're up to in the world. And what I started to see was, in a way, we're all just up against an illusion of thought. So whether we're talking about pricing or growing or a new way or sharing or anything, you start to see that when people understand, that their experience is being shaped by thought in the moment, and beyond that, they have access to this deeper nature. You start to see that relationship. I love connecting that with the game of business, and it's a game. And so I do a lot of work. I do a business accelerator session, which is just so much fun. It's so much fun helping people go beyond the illusion of limitation and tap into kind of new creativity and new potential. And then, as you know, Amir, I've been doing these Beyond Limits events, and really the inspiration for that was business people learning from other business people. So the majority of the speakers are business people and entrepreneurs that have been impacted by this understanding, and they just share what they've seen. And there's something really lovely and profound that happens when they sit in an audience and they see someone like them sharing.
Oh, I love that.
It's just a really nice experience. Yeah.
And can we, you have, I'm guessing, links and things like that you can share with
Yeah.
us? Yeah.
Yeah. You can go to barbarapatterson.com, go to the events. That's probably the place where you'll see each of them and you can learn about it. Yeah.
Awesome. I will post a link to that. And I have to say, you are such a blessing and a gift to our community. Honestly, I haven't gotten too in depth until today, and I would love to have you on again. I'm sure people would love have you on again. And thank you so much for
Oh,
your time
thank you,
today and your
Amir.
wisdom.
I love doing it and anytime. And thank you for everything you do as
Awesome.
well.
Thank
Yeah,
you. And everyone, if anyone has any questions or comments, Barb is in our Facebook group. I'm sure she'll reach out to you if you guys want to have a
absolutely.
deeper conversation about anything. And the beauty is, as it applies to everything, it's a constant, common, universal conversation. Absolutely, it is a universal conversation. And I
Mhm.
love having them. Barb, I'll see you in the other group. And
Yeah.
thank you again. Have a
Thanks for
wonderful,
showing up, everyone. Take care.
have a
Bye-bye.
wonderful day, you guys. Bye bye.